Stem cell politics. The House tonight votes to expand federal funding for stem cell research. The president vows his first veto ever. Also tonight, this. The deal that stopped a potential logjam in the U.S. Senate. Tonight, some controversial judges will get a vote. But can the deal hold? And what does it mean for the Supreme Court? Checks and your balance. How close are all of us to identity theft? There are new schemes to target your checking account. The Office. Can where you work determine what you weigh? This man says you could lose 30 pounds if you just design your office his way. And 1776. Tonight, our talk with the author whose new book will have Americans looking for history right in their own backyards.
From NBC News World Headquarters in New York, this is NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams.
Good evening. Tonight, the emotional and personal issue of stem cell research is flying through Congress. It's aimed directly at the White House, not to mention doctors' offices nationwide. President Bush has spoken on the issue. He did again today. His position, no federal funding for research using new embryos, no matter what scientific or medical advances may come of it. Well, tonight the House voted the other way. The Senate is likely to. The president has vowed a veto, but this issue isn't going away. In fact, it's just now gathering up new steam. We begin here tonight with NBC's Pete Williams.
To advocates of expanded research, this tank of frozen human embryos holds potential stem cells that could help cure diseases. Opponents see potential too, but as a frozen orphanage that should be off limits to researchers. Both sides in today's House debate were unusually passionate, and key supporters of expanded federal research come from the president's own party, who say many of those embryos would otherwise be discarded.
I don't support cloning, but I want to save life. We're this close to stopping juvenile diabetes.
It's too late for my beloved mother, who was totally debilitated by Alzheimer's disease, which killed her. But it's not too late for the 100 million other American people counting on us to support funding.
Stem cell research should help millions of Americans whose lives have been touched by devastating illnesses.
Research supporters have gained momentum from celebrities like Michael J. Fox, a Parkinson's patient, and children struggling with other diseases shown in TV ads. So today, opponents put a face on their side, children who began life as frozen embryos in fertility clinics and were inserted into the wombs of adoptive mothers. None would have been born if the embryos had been used for research. Among the adopting parents, Steve Johnson of Pennsylvania, partly paralyzed in an accident.
Would I kill my daughter so that I could walk again? Of course not. No one would. So then, why do we think it is okay to kill someone else's daughter?
Those children also visited President Bush today, who opposes expanded funding.
This bill would take us across a critical ethical line by creating new incentives for the ongoing destruction of emerging human life.
President Bush has vowed to veto the bill, and congressional supporters tonight concede they do not have the votes to override him and provide the money anyway. Pete Williams, NBC News, Washington.
Over on the Senate side, the cots were in place and senators were all ready for an all-nighter. They were girding, in fact, for a virtual shutdown until 14 senators who call themselves moderates emerged from a marathon meeting with a deal. It means the president will get his way on some federal judges, but he will lose on others, and it means all eyes will be on the next vacancy on the U.S. Supreme Court. On Capitol Hill tonight, NBC's Chip Reed. Chip, good evening.
Federal bench.
It's been 4 years since President Bush nominated Priscilla Owen to be a federal appeals court judge.
Judge Owens is finally going to get an up or down vote on the Senate floor.
Today, she received his congratulations not long after Senate Democrats voted to stop filibustering her nomination. It's the first fruit of a compromise reached last night by 14 senators, 7 from each party, to avert a showdown over judges. Under the deal, Owen and 2 other previously filibustered judicial nominees will be confirmed, but 2 others will continue to be blocked by Democrats. It was a rare victory for centrists and was quickly attacked from left and right.
This is preposterous. By this standard, the founding fathers have been tossed out.
On conservative talk radio today, the deal and the senators who made it were public enemy number one.
Let me do the translation for you, what that means. Extraordinary circumstances means anyone we don't like.
James Dobson of the conservative group Focus on the Family called the agreement a betrayal by a cabal of Republicans and a victory for Democrats. Liberal groups that have fought for years to defeat the nominees were also angry.
These nominees have records of hostility to individual rights and should not be rewarded with lifetime appointments to the federal bench.
If pressure groups can't agree on who won, Democrats and Republicans can't agree on what it all means. The deal allows filibusters only in extraordinary circumstances.
There will be filibusters of judges and of other things. That's what the Senate's all about.
But Reid added that he interprets the deal to mean that Republicans are banned from using the rule change known as the nuclear or constitutional option to stop future filibusters. Not so, says Republican leader Bill Frist.
Let me be very clear. The constitutional option remains on the table. It remains an option.
NBC's Chip Reid reporting from Capitol Hill for us tonight. Thanks. For more on what's been going on behind the scenes and where we may be headed, we are joined tonight by our Washington Bureau Chief, moderator of Meet the Press, Tim Russert. And Tim, is all of this really about the U.S. Supreme Court?
It sure is, Brian. The White House is looking at it that way, and so is the Senate. The White House, when they read this agreement, Brian, sees words in there that talk about advice and consent. And what the 14 members of the Senate, they're referred to now as the Mod Squad, moderate senators, requested was that the White House consult with them before making a nominee public on the U.S. Supreme Court. Advice and consent. Seek their input so that they can give them some warning signs if they think the choice that's coming down the track would be someone that Democrats would choose to filibuster.
Well, Tim, for the folks watching who like to see rare agreement in Washington, if these moderates can do this, what else might they be able to do?
Well, that's the interesting thing, Brian. The judge today was confirmed with over 80 votes. Half the Democrats voted for. So now people are looking at this and saying, what does this mean for Social Security? Can the White House try to fashion some compromise with the Republican base and reach out to these Democratic moderates? And what about an energy bill? Or even the confirmation of John Bolton to be ambassador to the United Nations? Are some of these moderate Democrats in a pool of eligible voters, if you will? They see the possibilities as endless. Democrats, on the other hand, think they have a strength here as well. Perhaps they can get more moderate or centrist legislation out of the Senate, much more to their liking than simply what President Bush wanted. It's going to be a real interesting process to follow, Brian, because it all is based upon trust. And it could blow up at any time.
From our Washington newsroom, Tim Russert, thanks as always, Tim. Now to Iraq and reports that have been circulating all day that one of this nation's most wanted men, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, has been seriously wounded. Those reports have been posted on several Islamic websites, which also call for prayers for Zarqawi. And while these usually are credible websites, according to our sources, still there's real question tonight about whether these latest reports are true. NBC News Pentagon correspondent Jim Miklaszewski has been nailing down this story all day for us at the Pentagon. Jim, what have you learned tonight?
Brian, the militant website that made the claim has posted accurate information about Zarqawi's activities in the past. And today said that the wounding of Zarqawi should rally his followers to launch even more attacks against U.S. forces. Other reports say that Zarqawi was wounded in a firefight with U.S. troops west of Ramadi over the weekend. And that is the area where the U.S. believes Zarqawi has been staging his attacks. But military and intelligence officials in the U.S. remain highly skeptical. This is the third report Zarqawi's been seriously wounded in as many weeks. And it's believed this may be more disinformation to throw the U.S. military off his scent. But one senior official said here tonight, the search for Zarqawi will continue until we find him or his body. Brian.
Jim Miklaszewski over at the Pentagon for us tonight. Thanks. These rumors about Zarqawi came on yet another bloody day in Iraq for both Americans and Iraqis. And again, the weapon of choice, car bombs. At least 355 people have been killed by car bombs. That is just since April 28th, when the new government took over. Now, as NBC's Richard Engel reports, there is a new push to take back the streets.
The wail of ambulances and fire trucks in Baghdad it usually means another car bomb, relentless and deadly. Killing 3 U.S. soldiers today and at least 2 Iraqi policemen in front of a girls' school. Car bombs in Baghdad have been on the rise for months. 18 in February, 20 in March, 65 in April, and at least 33 so far this month. Now, U.S. and Iraqi forces say they've had enough, launching Operation Squeeze Play to take Baghdad back from the car bombers.
We have dedicated ourselves to conducting large-scale operations to find these networks and destroy them once and for all.
The front line in this fight, garages, chop shops, and car dealerships, where car bombs are often passed to suicide drivers.
New BMWs or new foreign expensive cars, typically something we look out for. What's that?
Tasked with the search, 15,000 U.S. troops and at least 7,000 Iraqi forces. So far, more than 400 suspected insurgents have been detained.
American commanders say the mission to stop car bombers is now the main priority of Iraqi and American troops here in Baghdad, and that dozens of small missions are being launched from nearly every base in the city.
But finding car bombs is hard. The U.S. military has spotted a new trend, decoys. A suspicious car will race up to a convoy, but the real bomb will be in another car. And the U.S. military says insurgents will lend taxi cabs filled with explosives to unsuspecting drivers and then detonate them by remote control. Operation Squeeze Play could take months in a city with more than 1 million cars. Richard Engel, NBC News, Baghdad.
Up next here tonight, NBC News In Depth. Believe it or not, there is a new way for thieves to clean out your checking account, and you need to know about it. And later, Embracing History with David McCullough, our conversation about one very important year.
Tonight, Jay Leno steps up to testify at the Jackson trial, but are celebrity witnesses helping or hurting the King of Pop's case? Countdown, tonight on MSNBC.
NBC News In Depth tonight, a new twist on an age-old scam, check fraud. The Federal Reserve says the old-fashioned practice of writing checks is going down, while the newer one of paying bills electronically is coming up. This new version of the scam operates where the new and the old systems intersect and where no signature is required. NBC's Tom Costello explains tonight In Depth.
If Gordon Feller and Mary McNamara hadn't been closely watching their bank accounts, it's possible their nonprofit organization could have been wiped out.
Anyone sitting in an internet cafe in Moscow or Nigeria can register your checking account if they happen to get a hold of it.
Payroll checks we cash up to 300.
Did you say 300 for a payroll check?
Of course, check fraud is nothing new. Hollywood's Catch Me If You Can told the story of 1960s con man Frank Abagnale Jr., who was always one step ahead of the FBI.
Bottom of the check.
Today, anyone with a computer, printer, or an internet connection can create fake checks. All they need is some of your basic information. We're not going to say what, to create a demand draft. A paper check that requires no signature, often for business needs, or for people who don't have credit cards or can't sign the check.
The truth is, a simple stamp that says signature not required is good enough to get a bank to cash a check.
That's what happened to Mary McNamara. Someone logged on to QChecks.com, which creates demand drafts and sends them on for payment, but used McNamara's information.
It's our account number. We have no idea who has fraudulently registered our checking account on QChecks.
Someone had tried to use fraudulent checks to clean $10,000 out of the account. McNamara blames QChecks. For its part, QChecks.com tells NBC News it's an ongoing process to stay ahead of the creative schemes of the bad guys, and we work hard at this each day. But some in law enforcement think those demand checks that don't require a signature are the problem. And now 36 state attorneys general are asking the Federal Reserve to abolish them once and for all.
Because we feel that there are other automated debit procedures that legitimate businesses can use and won't hurt the economy. But demand drafts are just a ticket for scam artists to do their business.
But for Gordon Feller,
we would never want to see demand draft in our business again.
A legitimate transaction he feels is way too risky. Tom Costello, NBC News, New York.
Up next here tonight, how can you lose weight at a business meeting? We'll show you how. Awful scene in Dallas this afternoon. A car plowed into a daycare center in a strip mall. 60 kids were inside at the time, 8 of them hospitalized, 2 in serious condition. Witnesses said the car didn't try to stop. There were no skid marks. The car ended up deep inside the building. If you're one of the millions of Americans who'd like to lose some weight, but you're having a hard time finding time to exercise, you might be interested in an office in Rochester, Minnesota. It's billed as the office where you lose weight. Here is NBC's Kevin Tibbles.
You'd be forgiven if at first glance you thought you'd wandered into the gym. But this is a fully functioning office.
Just send me by fax.
Battling America's obesity epidemic while on the job.
I think the first thing we need to realize is the scope of the problem. It's now normal in America to be overweight.
The National Health Policy Forum determined that 64% of American adults are overweight or obese, a prescription for anything from diabetes to heart disease and stroke. And the Mayo Clinic says obesity is linked to more than 300,000 deaths each year. So Dr. James Levine set out to redesign the one place where millions spend at least 8 hours a day sitting, the office.
People with obesity are seated 2.5 hours per day more than people who are lean.
Out with the desk, in with the treadmill or stationary bike. Gone is the conference room. Meetings now held on the walking track.
The concept of moving while you work has all but disappeared from the modern workplace. This program hopes to revolutionize that by changing the way America conducts its business one step at a time.
Stand there.
The curious at first are dubious, but not for long when they're told the research shows they could lose between 30 and 50 pounds a year. Even fidgeting at your desk has been measured and burns calories.
I need to get out and start moving. I think offices should look like this.
But at what cost? Can companies afford all this equipment?
There are no cubicles here at all. Everybody still has their own space, yet these units cost less than half of what a cubicle costs.
Levine adds, with skyrocketing health costs, a healthier workforce would save billions.
This kind of concept could really help get America off her bottom.
In an era where many career-conscious Americans can't find the time to exercise, a new way to keep both the business and the body in good shape. Kevin Tibbles, NBC News, Rochester, Minnesota.
When we come back, the new book that says we all came awfully close to having British accents.
The Nightly Journal, brought to you by Walmart. Always low prices, always.
Our Nightly Journal concerns a new book in bookstores starting today. It's the work of an author who has already taught so much history to so many Americans. He's about to do it again. It's a story about how close the American Revolution and its leader, George Washington, came to total failure, were it not for a near military miracle where a New York landmark stands today.
On the shore, Brooklyn was a tiny village.
He may be the only man alive who was able to climb to the top of the Brooklyn Bridge and make 230 years completely disappear. Do you really have the ability to look at Brooklyn Heights and not see elevated expressways and apartment buildings?
I do.
You can take yourself right back.
Yes, because I'm so marinated in what it was like then. You get to a point where you almost can make the jump into that other time.
David McCullough wrote the book on the Brooklyn Bridge, along with 7 others, including Truman and John Adams, both Pulitzer winners. His newest is the story of the pivotal year 1776 and the revolution that would have ended in Brooklyn if not for a fog bank that allowed George Washington's troops to retreat across the river to Manhattan.
I think it would have been all over if the British had stopped that retreat. I think that would have ended it.
Our second stop, the highest point in Brooklyn, which is today Greenwood Cemetery, home of one of New York's great geographic secrets. The lady atop this memorial to the soldiers of 1776 is looking right into the eyes of another lady all the way across the harbor.
This was all thick forest. This was dense woods. And you can see how high up we are. So this was almost wilderness mountain fighting right nearby our great city.
And not far away, the 148-foot-high tower visible from Manhattan that marks the crypt that contains the remains of 10,000 POWs on the U.S. side who died on board British prison ships in New York Harbor.
And they died from a disease. They died from starvation. It was one of the worst atrocities imaginable. And they would be buried by prisoner burial parties in the sand along the shore. And for years, the bones and remains were washing up.
Back in 1908, 20,000 people showed up for the dedication. The fact that today's visitors to this park are more dedicated to basketball worries this lover of U.S. history and landmarks.
I believe that when one is writing history or trying to understand history, we ought to go to the places where events took place. We should take our children and our grandchildren there. Don't wait for the school trip to answer that need. We need to embrace the past as part of the present and part of the ground we walk on.
And back on the Great Bridge, there was this scene. School children on an outing assigned to draw what they saw.
Where are you from?
They didn't know who the nice man was with the head of white hair, but thanks to one sharp-eyed dad with a sharp pencil,
He'll take your signature.
Sure.
one lucky child's masterpiece is now signed
There you are.
by an American master.
Tomorrow.
David McCullough, one of America's great and most prolific writers, who is just as prolific in life, married 50 years, father of 5, grandfather of 17, and for him, family is a source of more pride than any book he's ever written. That is our broadcast for tonight. Thank you for being with us. I'm Brian Williams. We'll look for you right back here tomorrow night. Good night.
Tomorrow, a Today Show investigation. Counterfeit or watered-down drugs. Could they be in your pharmacy? And who's getting rich from this scheme?